And a live look at Capitol Hill in D.C. this morning, and that is where the president will give his State of the Union address to Congress. As we wait to see what the president's speech might have in it, we are checking in with political expert Dr. Ron Stevenson with Wayne State University, who is helping us break this down. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Dr. Stevenson. We appreciate your time. You know, I think one of the biggest questions, and this might be one of the more superficial questions of the entire night, we're expecting this to be a long State of the Union, especially as last year was a long joint session to Congress. Sounds like this one's going to be no different, right?
Yeah, I would expect it to be over the normal average of an hour. Trump set the record last year, even though it wasn't technically a State of the Union, for going an hour and a half. So I would expect it to be somewhere in that same range.
Yeah. What are you expecting to hear from the president tonight, especially as all of the news in the recent weeks? You know, we just heard from that reporter package before we dumped into you about the Iranian tensions, but also the news in the last couple of days with the tariffs. What are you expecting to hear from the president?
I expect that the president will primarily tout accomplishments that he believes he's achieved in the first year of his presidency. I think there's going to be a substantial discussion about campaign promises that he made, and then in the ways that he's achieved them. As was mentioned, affordability is at the top of the list, coupled with the tariffs. I do think there will be discussions about certain things have decreased in price, you know, the cost of eggs and things of that variety. And as far as tariffs go, I expect to see him sort of pivot and talk about how he's going to reinstitute the tariffs. So even though they struck him down based on one provision, there's an expectation that he's going to find other ways to keep the tariffs in place. And I'm fairly confident he will talk about that in his address.
Yeah, we hear from Trump often, especially as he's traveling, you know, with the press pool and everything. We hear from him quite frequently. One of the things that we are going to see tonight probably is the rhetoric, especially as we gear up for the November midterms. What do you think the messaging is going to be for Republicans in this speech tonight?
So based on his previous statements and the platform that he's been talking about, I think there's going to be a lot of comparisons between where we were and where he has taken us. He's mentioned like we're the hottest economy, we're back in terms of the international standing and things of that variety. I expect it'll be very much along the lines of what he's stated at his political rallies, in terms of touting the big beautiful bill, the reduced immigration, and then again, as he has, you know, sort of positioned himself an improved economy.
I want to ask you, too, because I know you're at Wayne State. I'm over here on the west side in Grand Rapids. Michiganders will be watching the speech closely. What do you expect Michiganders to be keeping a keen ear out for in this speech?
Definitely the affordability discussion and tariffs, you know, the impact that the tariffs have had on the automobile industry in particular here, you know, in Detroit, and probably potentially some discussion of the bridge, although I'm not sure that that's going to come up in the speech. Those are the things that I think are going to be the highest priorities for them.
Yeah, we also just heard from that reporter before we came to you that the governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, who is the Democratic rebuttal here, she will be giving the rebuttal tonight shortly after the president's speech. What do you expect Democrats to be rebutting with tonight?
So when Schumer and Jeffries announced Spanberger was going to be giving the response, they talked about how she was very representative of the core Democratic concerns with the Trump presidency, in particular about how to lower costs, how to improve safety in communities, but the idea that we should be promoting and doing it in a way that doesn't promote chaos and corruption. So I think that will be her primary focus, that we can do these things in a different way, in a more effective way than the president is currently doing them.
Yeah, another message that Democrats are likely trying to send here, maybe not as loud as the governor from Virginia will bring tonight, but of course we know that there are going to be several Jeffrey Epstein survivors in the chambers tonight. What sort of, I think we can kind of read between the lines as what sort of message Democrats are trying to send here, but in your words, what do you think they're trying to say to the president there?
I think they're highlighting potentially his most substantial weakness right now in terms of how this crisis has been handled. I think Bondi's testimony last week really highlighted it. The fact that she didn't acknowledge the survivors, they're going to put that front and center again in the State of the Union. Now, how they'll handle that, aside from, you know, like camera references and if there will be any outbursts, is yet to be seen. But yeah, that's a very strategic decision by Democrats to emphasize a core weakness of the current Trump presidency.
Yeah, of course, yesterday, you kind of alluded to it at the beginning of our interview that Trump was even saying yesterday about the economy in what he'll be speaking about in his remarks today, saying that the economy is good. Of course, what does he need to sell tonight to really drive that point home?
Realistically, what he needs to do is he needs to hit on the best benchmarks that demonstrate that there have been improvements. I think that people have been dissatisfied and why you see his rising disapproval rates because they can see that, if you say everything's better, that just doesn't seem to be the case. But if he can highlight like reductions in gas prices, that, the price of eggs have come down and there are some other things on the horizon that he's taking action to reduce costs on and promote affordability, that would probably be his best bet.
Yeah, last year you mentioned it was the record for the longest speech in that joint session to Congress there. We're expecting a longer speech tonight. What specifically stood out to you last year that made the speech so long versus how you think he'll handle this year? Is it going to be much of the same?
I think it'll be very similar. One of the important things about how Trump's rhetoric functions is his handlers, sometimes I'm sure this is a problem for them. He tends to go off script. So you have his base speech, which probably only about an hour and 15 minutes long. But then when he goes off and just sort of riffs and talks about things, he has a particular speaking style called the weave, where he'll start a sentence and then move to a different topic and then come back to what was there previously. So just by the nature of the way that he approaches these political speaking events, I do think that he's more prone, to give a longer speech.
Yeah, I want to talk about who will be there. I know we talked about the Epstein survivors that will likely be in the crowd. To your understanding, who else are you expecting to be in the crowd tonight?
So I haven't looked at all of his guests, and that's always the tricky part to see who he's going to point out. As based on previous things, I think he'll have people in the audience that talk about, the harms of immigration. He'll probably have some people that advance sort of his anti-trans agenda and things of that variety. I expect to see them in the audience just like they were last year. And anything that promotes law and order is likely to be one of his guests.
Yeah. Dr. Stevenson, as we kind of wrap things up here, final thoughts on what you're expecting. Obviously, this is his first one back, his first State of the Union. Of course, he had that joint session last year, but of course, the first official State of the Union this year as he re-enters the office there. What are you expecting, or I guess, what are your final thoughts in terms of what you're expecting tonight?
I think this will primarily be, sort of what we expect out of a Trump speech. It's very much going to be along the lines of a political rally. It won't be similar to like speeches that are like calling for unity and things of that variety. His rhetoric generally has been like Republicans are the only solution to this. So I expect to see some more of that. Whether there's anything brand new in the speech in terms of foreign policy is one of those areas that I'll be looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
All right, Dr. Ron Stevenson, we appreciate your insight and expertise on this situation. I know you'll be watching. We'll be watching here at the station. And by the way, you can watch the State of the Union address tonight on WZZM starting at 9 o'clock. Dr. Stevenson, thank you.
Thank you.